law enforcement. Mike, thank you for being here. Look, what I realized in talking to some of these police officers, and this is especially to the folks who are watching on TV, is the failure to protect our communities is a law and is a policy choice. It is a policy choice to defund the police, which is what Kamala Harris wants to do. It is a policy choice to open up the American southern border and allow migrant criminals to come into this community and make it less safe. It is a policy choice to not deport people, to suspend deportations, which is what Kamala Harris did. And I heard just earlier about a criminal who was deported from this community who came back in and then raped an 11-year-old girl just in the past couple of months. I'm the father of a 2-year-old girl. I cannot imagine having a government that cares so little about you that they're letting people who come into our communities get deported and come back in, and then they rape our children. That is a policy choice of Kamala Harris to suspend deportations and let somebody like that into our community. It is a policy choice to not prosecute people who sexually assault minors. When Kamala Harris was the Attorney General of California, she actually made it a non-violent crime to commit sex crimes with minors. Shouldn't we want to throw people who commit the most heinous crimes in our communities in prison and throw away the key? And yet Kamala Harris is making it easier for people to get out of jail after they commit heinous crimes with children. It's despicable, but it's another policy choice of Kamala Harris. And I guess my message to the American people, and certainly to all of you gathered here today, is we don't have to accept this from the federal government of the United States of America. Remember, when President Trump was in office, we deported illegal aliens. When President Trump was in office, we were building the border wall, which made it harder for illegal aliens to come here in the first place. When President Trump was president, we did not grant mass amnesty, which allowed illegal aliens to come into our communities, to harm our people, and then to stay here after the fact. We just need better leadership. It is so simple, and I can't believe that anyone would actually think that you should open up the American southern border to all of these criminals. You should let them commit crimes in our communities, and then you should refuse to deport them afterwards. And that's exactly what Kamala Harris has done. You know, I grew up in a community. I grew up in a place where when law enforcement wasn't able to do their job, it was the poor kids in my community, the kids who grew up like I did, who suffer the most. Because, of course, if you're wealthy, you can afford a gated community. If you're wealthy, you can afford private security. But when the police are not empowered to do their job, it is the most vulnerable people in our communities who suffer. We saw that, of course, in 2020 with the summer riots with our new vice presidential nominee on the Democratic side. Makes an interesting dynamic duo with Kamala Harris, because as he was promoting rioters and looters burning down the city of Minneapolis, Kamala Harris was helping to bail the rioters and looters out of jail. A really vicious cycle if you're living in that community, a really vicious cycle if you own one of those businesses that was burned down, and of course a very vicious cycle if you're one of the poor kids who needs law and order, who needs common sense safety, but doesn't have access to it because our government so often refuses to do its job. I want to do a couple of shout outs here, and I'd encourage these folks, if they're willing, to make a couple of remarks, and then I'll close this out and take some questions from the media. But I got to meet Jim Tiganelli. Sorry, Jim, I hope I pronounced that right. Jim is the leader of one of the most important associations of law enforcement officers here in the state of Michigan. I mean, he told me about just in a 30-day period recently, they lost 3 police officers. 3 police officers who lost their lives in the line of duty because Kamala Harris has sent out this message that it's open season on American police officers. And that filters down to the criminals who hear it, who know they're not going to suffer consequences for committing violent crime, and then do exactly that. And Jim's police officers lost their lives because of it. So I'd love to have Jim come up here and just say a few words if you're willing.